$1,907,000. That is the gap between two otherwise identical American lives. Same salary, same job market, same 35 years of work. The difference comes down to 5 moments. 5 ordinary Tuesdays. None of them felt like a financial decision at the time. One was a raise, one was a resignation letter, one was a mortgage pre-approval on a good afternoon, one was a frightening week in the stock market, and one was a phone call to Social Security at age 62. 5 crossroads, 5 forks in one ordinary road. Almost every American reaches all 5 of them eventually. Most Americans choose wrong at 4 out of 5, not because they are lazy, not because they are bad with money, because at the moment of choice, the wrong answer felt responsible. It felt normal. It felt like what everybody else was already doing. Nobody hands you a map at these intersections. Your phone never buzzes and says, "This exact turn costs $680,000, so today we are drawing that map ourselves." 5 crossroads, real numbers, real sources, and honest math. Let's start exactly where almost everyone starts. Here's what nobody tells you about financial crossroads. They never look like crossroads while you are standing in one. A crossroad in a movie has music and a dramatic pause. A real financial crossroad looks like a normal email from HR. It looks like a friendly loan officer saying you qualify for more. It looks like a red number on a screen at 11 at night. The signal is quiet. The consequence is enormous. And the gap between those two things is where most wealth disappears. Consider what the data already tells us about American behavior. 1/3 of workers cash out their entire 401k when they change jobs. 29% of retirees claim Social Security at the earliest possible age. Only about 1 in 10 waits until age 70. 40% of households earning over $500,000 say they live paycheck to paycheck. These are not stories about poor people making desperate choices. These are stories about ordinary people meeting an intersection unprepared. The pattern repeats across income levels, across states, across generations. And in almost every case, the expensive turn was the comfortable one. That is the actual problem we are solving today. Not how to earn more, not how to budget harder, just how to recognize the 5 specific moments that decide the outcome. Because you cannot make a better choice at a crossroad you never noticed. Here's what the data shows. Let's make this concrete with 2 people. Carla is 32 years old, a project coordinator in Ohio. She earns $68,000 a year before taxes. She has $11,000 in a 401k and no credit card debt. Diana is 34, a hospital operations lead in the same metro area. Diana earns $71,000 a year, slightly more than Carla. Diana has $19,000 saved and a slightly better benefits package. On paper, Diana is ahead. She earns more and she has saved more. If you met them both at a barbecue, you would bet on Diana. Let's keep this fair. Both women are responsible. Both pay their bills on time. Neither one gambles. Neither one has an addiction. Neither one is reckless. Both of them will hit exactly the same 5 crossroads over the next 33 years. Both will get a meaningful raise in their 30s. Both will change employers at least once. Both will buy a house around age 40. Both will live through at least 2 severe market crashes. And both will eventually reach age 62 with a decision to make. The 5 intersections are identical. Only the turns will differ. By age 65, Carla will have roughly $2.4 million. Diana will have roughly $500,000. Same country, same decades, same effort, same discipline, a gap of nearly $1.9 million built from 5 afternoons. And here is the uncomfortable part of this story. At the moment of each decision, Diana was doing what most people around her did. Every single one of her choices was defensible in the moment. Every single one was recommended by someone she trusted. Nobody in her life ever said, "This is a crossroad, slow down." Run the numbers on that and it stops being a story about character. It becomes a story about information arriving too late, so let's make sure it arrives early for you. Crossroad number 1 shows up in your late 20s or early 30s. It arrives disguised as good news. Here's what nobody tells you about your first significant raise. The raise itself is not the event. The 48 hours afterward are. Carla and Diana both received an $8,000 raise the same year. Before taxes, that's roughly $667 a month. After taxes, call it $500 in real take-home money. Diana did what most people do with a raise. Nothing formal. She did not cut anything. She did not add any automatic transfer. The money simply arrived in her checking account and quietly dissolved. A slightly nicer apartment. A car payment upgrade, more convenient spending. 6 months later, Diana genuinely could not tell you where the raise went. This is not a personal failing. This is measured, documented human behavior. Research on lifestyle inflation finds households routinely absorb 55 to 70% of a raise into spending. And the effect does not disappear at high incomes. A Goldman Sachs report found 40% of households earning over $500,000 report living paycheck to paycheck. Read that number again, slowly. $500,000 a year, and still no margin at the end of the month. That tells you lifestyle inflation is not an income problem. It is a default settings problem, and it repeats at every income level. Carla did one thing differently, and it took 11 minutes. Before her first larger paycheck arrived, she raised her 401k contribution. She routed half the raise, $4,000 a year, straight into investments. She never saw that money in checking. She never had to resist it. The other $4,000 went to her life, guilt-free. That is the entire intervention. Half the raise automated on day one. Now run the numbers on 11 minutes of work. $4,000 a year invested for 33 years at a 7% return. That single decision compounds to roughly $475,000. $475,000 from a form Carla filled out once. Diana got the exact same raise and kept the exact same job. Her balance at 65 is $475,000 lower. Here's the part that should genuinely bother you. Diana never made a decision. Diana let a default make it. The raise arrived, the checking account absorbed it, and that was the turn. Most people believe a crossroad requires an active choice. At crossroad number 1, the wrong turn is doing absolutely nothing. The rule for this intersection is simple enough to remember forever. Root half of every raise before you ever see it in checking. Not after, not next month, before, because the only version of you who can win this argument is the one who never has it. There's a second layer to this crossroad worth naming out loud. Most raises come attached to a promotion, and promotions come attached to identity. You are not just earning more. You now feel like someone who earns more. That new identity buys things before you consciously decide anything. A better car signals the new title. A better zip code signals the new title. Nobody in your life will ever tell you the signal was optional. Diana's co-workers congratulated her on the new apartment. Nobody congratulated Carla on the contribution form she filed. That asymmetry is exactly why Crossroad 1 is the most missed of the 5. The reward for choosing well here is completely invisible for about a decade. And then it is the largest number on your statement. Crossroad 2 arrives with a resignation letter and a form nobody explains. You leave a job, your old 401k has a balance sitting in it. Your former employer sends you paperwork with 3 or 4 boxes. One of those boxes says, essentially, send me a check. That box is the most expensive box in American personal finance. According to Vanguard's How America Saves research, 1/3 of workers who leave a job take the whole balance in cash. 1 in 3, not 1 in 30. 1 in 3. And it is not evenly distributed across the workforce. 42% of hourly workers cash out when they leave. Only 21% of salaried workers do the same thing. Workers with inconsistent paychecks cash out at rates 10 to 15 points higher. That is not a character gap. That is a cash flow gap. But the math does not care why you checked the box. Diana left her hospital job at 38 with $54,000 saved. She was moving to a better role with a 2-month gap in between. She needed a cushion. The check felt like the responsible bridge. So Diana checked the box, and the money came, except it did not come as $54,000. Under age 59.5, there is a 10% early withdrawal penalty. On top of that, the entire amount counts as ordinary income that year. Between federal tax, state tax, and the penalty, a typical worker loses upward of 30%. Diana's $54,000 balance arrived as about $36,700. Roughly $17,000 evaporated before the check cleared. That's the visible cost. It is not the real cost. Here's what actually happens to that $54,000 if you leave it invested. 27 years at a 7% return turns it into about $335,000. Diana traded $335,000 for $36,700. She solved a 2-month problem by spending a 27-year asset. And this leakage is not rare enough to ignore at a national level. Research from the Center for Retirement Research finds that leakage leaves retirement balances roughly 20% smaller than they otherwise would be. 20% of the entire American retirement system gone to small emergencies. Carla changed jobs at 38 too. Same industry. Same gap in pay. Carla rolled her balance into an IRA and used a credit union loan for the gap. The loan cost her about $1,100 in interest over 14 months. $1,100 to protect $335,000. That is the entire difference between the two women at Crossroad 2. The rule here is blunt, and it applies at every balance level. Your old 401k is not savings. It is a machine that is already running. Cashing it out is not withdrawing money. It is destroying the machine. Move it, don't spend it, even when the gap feels scary. And there is a smaller trap sitting right next to the big one. Some workers avoid the cash out, but leave the old account behind entirely. The balance sits with a former employer, unwatched, sometimes drifting into a default cash fund. Money parked in cash is not invested. It is just waiting. Over 20 years, waiting is almost as expensive as withdrawing, so the rule has two halves, not one. Do not cash it out, and do not forget it exists. A bank teller once told Diana that leaving it alone was the safe option. He was not lying. He was answering a different question than the one that mattered. Crossroad 3 is the loudest one, and almost everyone gets the question wrong. People agonize for months over renting versus buying. That is not actually the decision that determines the outcome. The decision that determines the outcome is how much house. And that number gets set in a 15-minute pre-approval conversation. Let's look at the real American landscape first. The median age of a first-time buyer has climbed to a record 40 years old. The median existing home sale price sits around $413,000. A Redfin analysis found Americans need roughly $116,000 of income to afford that median home. Median first-time buyer income is about $95,900. There is a $20,000 gap between what buyers earn and what the market asks. That gap is where the expensive turn hides. Diana walked into a lender's office at 40 with a pre-approval in hand. The financial advisor across the desk was friendly, competent, and completely accurate. He told her she qualified for $600,000. Notice the word. He said qualified. He did not say wise. A pre-approval number is a risk calculation about the lender, not a life plan about you. Diana bought at the top of her approval. Her housing payment landed near 38% of her gross monthly income. The traditional guideline, the 28% rule, exists for a reason. Lenders will let you reach 43% of income on total debt. That ceiling protects the loan. It does not protect your retirement. The difference between a 28% house and a 38% house at Diana's income is roughly $600 a month. $600 a month sounds survivable, and it is. That is exactly why it is dangerous. $7,200 a year, invested at 7% for 30 years, becomes about $680,000. $680,000 is the price of 10 extra percentage points of house. And there's a second, quieter cost at this intersection. 26% of first-time buyers now tap a 401k, IRA, or brokerage account for the down payment. 1 in 4. Buyers is funding the house by shrinking the retirement machine. The house feels like an investment, so the trade feels neutral. It is not neutral. One asset compounds while you sleep. The other one has a roof that leaks. Carla bought a house the same year in the same market. She bought at 75% of what the lender approved. Smaller yard, older kitchen, 10 minutes further from downtown. She kept the 6. $100 monthly difference invested and never touched her 401k. Neither woman was reckless. Both bought a home. Both are homeowners today. Only one of them let a stranger's risk model set her savings rate. The rule for Crossroad 3 fits on an index card. The pre-approval is a ceiling, not a target. Decide your monthly number before anyone tells you what you qualify for. Write that number on paper and bring the paper into the room. Because the room is designed to move the number upward, not downward. Everyone in that transaction is paid on the size of the transaction. The agent, the lender, the appraiser, the title company, all of them. None of them is dishonest. All of them are pointed the same direction. You are the only person in that building whose incentive is a smaller number. That is not a conspiracy. That is just how the incentives line up. And it is why Crossroad 3 quietly reshapes the next 30 years of cash flow. A mortgage is not a purchase. It is a 3-decade subscription to a monthly payment. Crossroad 4 does not arrive on a schedule. It arrives on a Thursday. The market drops. Then it drops again. Then the headlines get loud. Your account shows a number you have never seen before. And every instinct you have says, stop the bleeding. Here's what actually happens when people act on that instinct. Dalbar has measured average investor returns against the market since 1985. In 2024, the S&P 500 returned 25.05%. The average equity investor earned 16.54% that same year. That's a gap of 848 basis points in a single year. Not from fees, not from bad funds, from timing. Withdrawals occurred in every quarter of that year. The largest outflows happened right before a major surge in returns. And in 2025, Dalbar recorded a record monthly withdrawal rate of 2.3% in July alone. People sell into fear, then buy back into confidence. Fear is cheap to feel and extremely expensive to act on. Diana had $120,000 invested when the market fell hard. She watched it drop toward $84,000 over 11 weeks. Her millennial friend at work had already moved everything to cash. He told her he'd get back in when things calmed down. That sentence has cost Americans more money than any product ever sold. Diana sold near the bottom and locked in a $36,000 loss. She waited for clarity. Clarity showed up about 14 months after the rebound started. Here's the compounding cost of that single Thursday. $120,000, left alone at 7% for 25 years, becomes about $651,000. $84,000 over the same 25 years becomes about $456,000. A gap of roughly $195,000. She did not lose that money in the crash. She lost it in the sale. Carla did something that felt almost irresponsible at the time. She opened her brokerage app once, confirmed her contributions were still automatic, and closed it. Then she did not open it again for 4 months. That is the entire strategy. There's nothing else to it. Most people believe surviving a crash requires courage. It mostly requires distance between your emotions and the sell button. The rule for Crossroad 4 is unglamorous and it works. Decide in advance and in writing what would make you sell. If the answer is nothing, then a red screen is not new information. There is one more thing worth understanding about this intersection. A crash does not feel like a crossroad because it feels like an emergency. Emergencies compress your thinking down to the next 48 hours. That compression is the actual mechanism that destroys long-term returns. The market is not testing your intelligence during a crash. It is testing whether your plan was written before or during the panic. Carla's plan was written on a Sunday afternoon 2 years earlier. Diana's plan was written at 11 at night with a red screen glowing. Same market, same information, 2 completely different documents. Write yours on a boring day when nothing at all is happening. Crossroad 5 waits at age 62, and it comes with a lot of advice. Most of that advice comes from people who are not doing the math. Social Security lets you claim as early as 62 or as late as 70. Claiming at 62 produces a benefit about 30% below your full retirement amount. Waiting until 70 produces a benefit about 24% above it. In real numbers for 2026, a $2,000 full benefit becomes about $1,400 at 62. That same benefit becomes about $2,480 at 70. That is a difference of $1,080 every single month. For life. Now look at what Americans actually do. Roughly 29% of eligible retirees claim at the earliest possible age. Only about 1 in 10 waits until 70. Meanwhile, a National Bureau of Economic Research paper found that more than 90% of workers aged 45 to 62 would be financially better off waiting until 70. 90% should wait. 10% do. That is the widest gap between advice and behavior anywhere in personal finance. Diana claimed at 62. Her father told her to. He was 78, sharp, and completely certain about it. He said the same thing millions of parents say at kitchen tables every year. Take it while you can still enjoy it. You never know. That advice is emotionally warm and mathematically expensive. Over a 20-year retirement from 70 to 90, the difference is about $259,000. And that ignores cost of living adjustments, which compound on the larger number. Here's what nobody tells you about the Social Security decision. Delaying is not a bet on living a long time. Delaying is insurance against living a long time without money. The risk you are managing is not dying early. The risk is being 91 with a benefit that was set too low at 62. Carla bridged the gap with 3 years of portfolio withdrawals and part-time work. She claimed at 67, not even 70, and still captured most of the difference. You do not need the perfect answer at this intersection. You need to not take the default one on your birthday. And there is a version of this crossroad most people never hear about. For a married couple, the larger benefit usually becomes the survivor benefit. Whichever spouse earned more is effectively setting 2 people's income floor. Claiming early at 62 can quietly lower a widow's income for 20 years. That is the part nobody discusses at the kitchen table. Diana's decision at 62 was not just about Diana. Carla's decision at 67 protected someone who was not in the room. Run the numbers on the household, not just the individual. Because at this intersection, the wrong turn outlives the person who took it. Now here's the part almost nobody sees coming. Look back at all 5 crossroads and find the pattern. At the raise, Diana did nothing and the checking account decided. At the job change, Diana checked the box that was easiest to check. At the house, Diana accepted the number the lender printed. At the crash, Diana followed what her coworker had already done. At 62, Diana did what her father recommended. Diana never actually chose wrong at a single crossroad. Diana never chose at all. Every one of her 5 turns was made by a default she inherited. And that leads to the number that reframes this entire video. Consider Maya, 28, a lab technician who has never made a financial mistake in her life. She was automatically enrolled in her company 401k on her first day. The default deferral rate was 3% of her pay. From 2006 until about 2021, 3% was the most common default in America. It was never designed to be enough for retirement. It was chosen because it was small enough that nobody would opt out. That is the actual origin of the number in millions of American retirement accounts. A behavioral compromise to prevent opt-outs, mistaken by workers for a recommendation. Research shows nearly 4 in 10 participants stay at that default rate for years. Fewer than half ever turn on the auto-increase feature sitting in the same menu. Maya has done nothing wrong. Maya is saving diligently every payday. Maya is on track to arrive at 65 with a fraction of what she needs. Not because she chose badly, because she never knew a choice existed. The good news buried in that same research is real. 6% is now the most common default, used by about a third of plans. The system is slowly correcting, but the system will not call you. So here is the honest reframe of this entire topic. You do not have 5 money crossroads in your life. You have 5 moments where somebody else's default will decide for you unless you interrupt it. The raise has a default. The rollover has a default. The pre-approval is a default. Panic is a default. 62 is a default. Wealth is not built by choosing right at 5 intersections. Wealth is built by noticing that you are standing at 1. Every default in your financial life was set by someone who does not know your name. Let's put the whole map in one place. Crossroad 1, the raise. Cost Diana about $475,000. Crossroad 2, the cash out. Cost her about $298,000. Crossroad 3, the house. Cost her about $680,000. Crossroad 4, the crash. Cost her about $195,000. Crossroad 5, the claim. Cost her about $259,000. Together, that is $1,907,000. 5 afternoons, 33 years, $1.9 million, every number. Here assumes a 7% annual return and traceable public data. Your numbers will differ. The structure will not. And if you are wondering which crossroad matters most, that is the wrong question. The right question is which one you are standing near right now. If you got a raise this year, you are at Crossroad 1 today. If you change jobs, there is an old account waiting for a decision. If you are shopping for a house, your number is being set this month. So here is the one thing worth doing before this video leaves your head. Pick the crossroad closest to you and change one default this week. One form, one transfer, one phone call. The most important financial decision you can make is knowing the difference between a strategy that's right for you and a strategy that's right for someone else. Do the math. Make the decision that matches your reality, not someone else's sales pitch.